Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. The video would burst into motion with archival footage or detailed animation showing the churning waves of the English Channel under a stormy sky. Boats packed with tense, determined soldiers would appear, pushing toward the heavily fortified beaches of Normandy. Explosions would rumble in the distance, flashes of gunfire lighting up the gray morning mist. The camera would shift between wide, overwhelming shots of the vast armada and close-ups of young faces, some fearful, some stoic, all prepared to risk everything. Over this gripping imagery, the voiceover would speak with gravity and urgency. June 6, 1944, a single day that decided the fate of the free world. This is the story of courage, sacrifice, and a turning point that changed history forever. The voice would not just recount facts but would evoke emotion, emphasizing how the outcome of the Second World War and the shape of the modern world hung in the balance during those crucial hours. This opening wouldn't just set the scene, it would immediately pull viewers into the heart of D-Day's human drama, signaling that what they are about to witness is not just a military operation, but a defining moment for freedom, for history, and for humanity itself. The introduction would begin by grounding the audience quickly. D-Day, officially known as Operation Overlord, wasn't just another battle in the long and brutal saga of World War II. It was the largest amphibious invasion in history. On June 6, 1944, over 156,000 Allied troops from the United States, Britain, Canada, and other nations stormed 5 beaches along the coast of Nazi-occupied France. This wasn't merely a military operation. It was a monumental gamble, a carefully orchestrated strike that aimed to break Hitler's iron grip on Europe and bring the war closer to its end. The narrator would stress that the stakes could not have been higher. Had D-Day failed, the course of the war and the fate of millions might have been drastically different. Success meant hope for liberation. Failure could have meant prolonged tyranny. To make viewers lean in even more, the voiceover would hint at the journey ahead. Not just the famous facts everyone knows, but the hidden stories, the acts of quiet heroism, the ingenious strategies, the staggering losses that often get overshadowed by tales of triumph. It would promise a deeper exploration of D-Day's true human and historical cost, setting the tone for a story that is as much about courage and sacrifice as it is about strategy and victory. By 1944, Europe was a continent held in a stranglehold by Nazi Germany. Hitler's armies had swept across much of the continent, crushing resistance and fortifying their control with brutal efficiency. In the east, the Soviet Union was locked in a bloody struggle against the Nazis, bearing enormous casualties to push the enemy back. Yet in the west, the Allies had not yet established a foothold on the European mainland. Britain stood firm, battered but unbroken, while the United States, newly energized after entering the war in 1941, brought industrial might and manpower to the fight. However, without a second front, Germany could concentrate its forces against the Soviets, prolonging the war and the suffering. The urgency to open a Western front grew as the Soviet Union continued to bear the brunt of the Nazi war machine in the East. Stalin had long demanded a second front to divide German forces and alleviate the crushing battles his people faced. The Western Allies, understanding both the military and political necessity of such an action, realized that without decisive intervention, the Soviets might either fall or dominate post-war Europe entirely. Thus, Operation Overlord was conceived, not merely as a tactical maneuver, but as a pivotal move in the global chess game of World War II. The scale of Operation Overlord was staggering. It involved hundreds of thousands of troops, thousands of ships, and an intricate network of logistical support that stretched across continents. Selecting the landing sites was a decision of monumental importance. Normandy, with its beaches less heavily fortified than the Pas de Calais, offered a challenging but possible landing ground. Even so, the choice required extensive reconnaissance, careful timing with tides and moonlight, and the construction of artificial harbors known as mulberries to enable the rapid offloading of supplies. Secrecy was paramount. The Allies launched Operation Fortitude, an elaborate deception plan that convinced German intelligence the real invasion would occur at Pas de Calais. Fake armies, dummy tanks, and misleading radio traffic were all part of the illusion. This trickery bought precious time on D-Day, as Hitler hesitated to commit his strongest forces to Normandy, fearing the real assault was still to come elsewhere. The stakes could not have been higher. A failed landing would have cost tens of thousands of lives and could have given Hitler enough breathing room to fortify his Western defenses permanently. More than that, a disastrous D-Day could have shaken Allied unity and resolve, perhaps, prolonging the war by years or tipping the balance entirely. Every ship that crossed the Channel, every paratrooper who jumped behind enemy lines, every soldier who stormed the beaches knew the burden they carried. D-Day was not just an operation, it was the culmination of years of struggle, sacrifice, and hope, and its success would shape the destiny of the modern world. Creating the force needed for D-Day was a feat of human will and ingenuity unmatched in military history. It required the coordination of 156,000 soldiers from the United States, Britain, Canada, and other allied nations, supported by an armada of 5,000 ships and a fleet of 11,000 aircraft. Every man, every vessel, and every piece of equipment had to be meticulously organized and synchronized, like the intricate gears of a vast machine. Training camps across Britain buzzed with preparation. Soldiers practiced amphibious assaults on mock beaches, engineers tested bridge-building techniques, and air crews rehearsed paratrooper drops behind enemy lines. Technological innovation played a critical role in making the invasion possible. Engineers developed mulberry harbors, portable artificial harbors made of massive concrete structures that could be floated across the Channel and assembled off the coast of Normandy. These temporary ports would allow the Allies to rapidly unload troops, vehicles, and supplies onto the beaches in the crucial early days before a permanent harbor could be secured. Alongside them was the Pluto Pipeline, pipelines under the ocean, an ambitious project to deliver fuel from Britain to France under the seabed, ensuring that advancing armies would not be starved of the lifeblood of modern warfare: gasoline. The famous Higgins boats, small flat-bottomed landing craft designed by Andrew Higgins, became the key to getting men and equipment from ship to shore. Their ability to run aground, drop a ramp, and quickly unload troops onto open beaches made mass amphibious assaults feasible. Without these boats, the logistics of D-Day would have been impossible. Deception was another critical element. Operation Bodyguard, a complex web of misinformation, aimed to mislead the Germans about the time, place, and size of the invasion. Fake radio traffic, double agents feeding false intelligence, and entire phantom armies equipped with inflatable tanks convinced Hitler that the main attack would come at Pas-de-Calais, not Normandy. Even after the landings began, German commanders hesitated, believing it was merely a diversion. Despite all these preparations, enormous challenges remained. The tides and weather had to align perfectly. A narrow window of time was needed when the moon and tide were just right for the landings and paratrooper drops. Meteorologists played a critical role, advising General Eisenhower to delay the invasion by 1 day to June 6, 1944, when a brief break in stormy weather provided a slim chance of success. Even so, conditions were rough, and many landing craft foundered or drifted off course. The German defenses, known as the Atlantic Wall, were formidable. Stretching thousands of miles along Europe's western coast, they included concrete bunkers, minefields, barbed wire, and beach obstacles designed to rip apart landing craft. Elite German units, seasoned by years of brutal combat, waited behind these fortifications, ready to unleash devastating fire on the first soldiers who dared set foot on the beaches. D-Day was a masterpiece of planning, but it was not a guarantee. Everything, from the invention of new technologies to the success of deception operations to the whims of nature itself, had to align for the invasion to have a chance. It was a moment where preparation met courage, and the fate of the free world hung precariously in the balance. In the earliest hours of June 6, 1944, before the sun even rose over France, the first blows of Operation Overlord were struck from the sky. Thousands of American and British paratroopers from the U.S. 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions and the British 6th Airborne Division descended into the dark, chaotic fields of Normandy. Their mission was daring and dangerous: seize critical bridges, destroy German defenses, and sow confusion behind enemy lines to prepare the way for the seaborne invasion. Dropping into heavy fog, poor visibility, and intense anti-aircraft fire, many paratroopers landed far off course, scattered across the countryside. Yet, Despite the chaos, they adapted quickly, forming improvised units and accomplishing vital objectives, holding key roads, capturing bridges like Pegasus Bridge, and disrupting German reinforcements. As dawn broke, the largest amphibious invasion in history roared to life across 5 carefully chosen beaches. At Utah Beach, on the westernmost edge, American forces under Brigadier General Theodore Roosevelt Jr. landed nearly a mile off target due to strong currents. Miraculously, this mistake worked to their advantage. The sector they landed in was less heavily defended, and the assault quickly gained ground with relatively few casualties compared to other beaches. But at Omaha Beach, the story was tragically different. The U.S. soldiers who stormed Omaha faced steep bluffs bristling with German machine guns, artillery, and mortars. The beach was a death trap, with obstacles, mines, and tank traps littering the sand. Units were decimated before they even reached the shore. Survivors were pinned down, fighting for every inch of sand under relentless enemy fire. Omaha earned its grim nickname, Bloody Omaha, where bravery was measured not by grand advances, but by simply surviving. It was only through the fierce determination of small groups of soldiers, often acting without clear orders, that the beach was finally secured. Further east, British and Canadian forces landed on Gold, Juno, and Sword beaches. They faced strong resistance, especially at Juno, where Canadian troops encountered heavily fortified positions. Yet by day's end, they had pushed farther inland than any other Allied units. British forces on Gold and Sword beaches also made critical gains, capturing key towns and securing roadways crucial for moving inland. Each beach had its own bitter struggle, but each contributed to the overall success of the invasion. D-Day was not only a triumph of grand strategy, it was also a mosaic of individual heroism. Medics like Desmond Doss, though better known for his later actions in the Pacific, embodied the spirit of those who ran into danger to save the wounded. Paratroopers, isolated behind enemy lines, fought tenaciously to link up with their units. The Bedford Boys, a group of young men from a small town in Virginia, suffered heartbreaking losses at Omaha Beach, their story standing as a symbol of the personal cost of the invasion. For every iconic moment captured in black and white photographs, countless others went unseen. Quiet acts of courage, split-second decisions that turned the tide, and sacrifices made by soldiers who would never see home again. The first day of Operation Overlord ended with the Allies firmly entrenched on the beaches of Normandy, but at a terrible cost. Thousands were dead, wounded, or missing. Yet the foothold had been won. The gate to Europe had been breached, and the road to liberation had begun, paved with blood, bravery, and the unbreakable will of ordinary men doing extraordinary things. Securing the beachheads on D-Day was an extraordinary achievement, but it came at a staggering cost. Over 10,000 Allied casualties were reported by the end of June 6th, including more than 4,000 confirmed dead. Every patch of sand and hedgerow was paid for with blood. What made the ultimate success possible wasn't just the courage of the troops, but also the crucial support from the sea and sky. Naval bombardments pounded German fortifications before and during the landings, though not always with pinpoint accuracy. Warships sailed dangerously close to shore to bring their guns to bear, knocking out bunkers and artillery that could have turned the beaches into slaughterhouses. Meanwhile, relentless air attacks in the days leading up to and during the invasion weakened German infrastructure, cutting off reinforcements and destroying key bridges and roads. Yet, even with this massive firepower, the invasion's success was precarious. A swift and organized German counterattack could have hurled the Allies back into the sea. Here, fortune and miscalculation played a decisive role. Hitler and his generals had been fooled by the Allies' elaborate deception operations, particularly Operation Bodyguard, which convinced them the main invasion would come at Pas-de-Calais, not Normandy. Hitler hesitated, refusing to release elite armored divisions stationed elsewhere, believing the Normandy landings were merely a feint. He insisted that direct orders must come from him personally to move these critical forces, a delay that bought the Allies precious hours to establish footholds and reinforce their positions. Several critical moments tipped the scales. The rapid capture of key bridges and crossroads by airborne forces prevented German counterattacks from consolidating. Commanders like Brigadier General Norman Coda at Omaha Beach rallied shattered units with fearless leadership, famously urging, "Gentlemen, We are being killed on the beaches. Let us go inland and be killed. Such bold actions inspired battered troops to push forward when hesitation might have spelled disaster. The triumph of D-Day, often remembered today as a monumental achievement, was anything but assured in the moments it unfolded. Victory was precarious, hanging on the edge of catastrophe, as confusion, fierce German defense, and the natural chaos of war nearly overwhelmed the invading forces. Mislanded paratroopers found themselves scattered across unfamiliar countryside. Tanks intended to support infantry on the beaches sank in the rough channel waters. At Omaha Beach, the deadliest landing site, entire waves of troops were cut down before they even reached the shore, and for hours it looked as though the assault might collapse entirely. What ultimately turned the tide wasn't a single element, but a fragile, almost miraculous combination. Months of meticulous planning allowed the Allies to anticipate some of the worst obstacles. Overwhelming firepower, artillery barrages, bombing runs, and naval gunfire softened, though never entirely, destroyed German defenses. Strategic deception, through operations like Fortitude South and Bodyguard, kept German commanders guessing about the true invasion point, sowing hesitation and disorganization in their ranks. On the ground, courageous leadership was often the decisive factor. Officers and non-commissioned soldiers made split-second decisions under fire, leading shattered units forward when plans disintegrated. Amidst the carnage, countless acts of individual bravery, men wading through machine gun fire, engineers dismantling beach obstacles under bombardment, kept the fragile assault moving. Yet even with all of this, the Allies needed something intangible: luck. Weather windows were narrow. A last-minute storm nearly postponed the invasion, and a break in the weather barely long enough allowed the landings to go ahead. German commanders failed to react decisively, held back by Hitler's strict orders and misbelief that the true attack was yet to come elsewhere. If any one of these factors had shifted, a few more hours of delay, a stronger German counterattack, worse weather, the outcome could have been vastly different. D-Day did not end the war. But by tearing a hole through Hitler's heavily fortified Atlantic Wall, the Allies opened a path to France, and from there, to the heart of Nazi Germany. That first fragile foothold proved enough. It became a symbol of what determined preparation, international cooperation, and human courage could achieve in the face of staggering odds, a breach through which liberation would flood into an enslaved Europe. The aftermath of D-Day, though marked by great victories, came at a high cost. The Allied forces had secured their beachheads, but the price in lives lost was staggering. By the end of the first day, over 425,000 total casualties, both Allied and German, had already been recorded in the invasion. Allied forces suffered about 209,000 casualties, including over 4,000 dead, with many more wounded or missing in action. The Germans, too, faced devastating losses, with estimates suggesting up to 400,000 casualties, though many of these were from subsequent battles as the Allies pushed deeper into France. Despite these early losses, the success of D-Day proved to be a pivotal turning point. With the beaches secured, the Allies began their rapid push across France, liberating towns and cities from Nazi occupation. The first major milestone in this campaign was the liberation of Paris, which took place on August 25, 1944. After weeks of fighting, the French capital fell into the hands of the Allies, and the city erupted in celebration. Parisians rejoiced as they were freed from nearly 4 years of Nazi control. The liberation of Paris not only provided a significant morale boost for the Allies, but also signified a shift in the war's momentum. For many, it was a symbol of hope, proof that Nazi control in Western Europe was finally breaking. This victory marked the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany. The Allies now had a foothold in Western Europe, and the Axis powers began to retreat in earnest. The invasion of Normandy paved the way for the eventual collapse of the Nazi regime, forcing German forces to fight on multiple fronts. The Soviet forces had been pressing from the east for months, and now the Allies were advancing from the west. The German army, already stretched thin, struggled to fend off these two massive forces, which would lead to the fall of Berlin in May 1945. D-Day was not just a military success. It was a psychological blow to Hitler and the Nazi regime. For years, they had believed in the invincibility of their military power and the strength of their defenses. But the success of the invasion shattered that belief. The invasion forced Germany into a defensive posture they would never recover from, marking the beginning of a chain reaction that would eventually bring down their empire. For the Allies, the consequences of D-Day were profound. The operation solidified the United States, Britain, and other nations' leadership in the war effort, cementing their ability to push for total victory in Europe. It provided an unprecedented opportunity to unite and strengthen the Western Front, and within a year of the invasion, Nazi Germany had been defeated, bringing an end to one of the darkest chapters in world history. In the broader scope of the war, D-Day's success marked the turning of the tide. The invasion showed that coordinated, large-scale operations could not only win battles but decisively alter the course of the war. It signaled to the world that the Allies were not only capable of defeating the Axis powers, but that they were beginning to control the narrative of the war's end. The Allies' victory on D-Day wasn't just the beginning of the end, it was the start of the liberation of Europe, the ultimate defeat of Nazi tyranny, and the restoration of freedom to millions of people. While the major narratives of D-Day often focus on the storming of the beaches and the generals who orchestrated the invasion, there are countless lesser-known stories that were just as critical to its success. One of the most vital contributions came from the French resistance. Operating in secret under the constant threat of execution, these brave men and women gathered intelligence, sabotaged German supply lines, cut telephone wires, and disrupted railroads. Their work created chaos behind enemy lines just as the Allies were landing, confusing German forces and slowing their ability to respond effectively to the invasion. The resistance's efforts helped save countless Allied lives and ensured that German reinforcements could not arrive in full strength when they were most needed. Women, too, played indispensable roles on D-Day, even though they were not typically seen on the front lines. Female nurses, often called Angels of Mercy, landed shortly after the first waves of troops and set up field hospitals under harrowing conditions. They treated the wounded under fire, performing life-saving surgeries and triage in tents, and hastily constructed medical stations. Beyond the battlefield, women worked as code breakers, deciphering German communications and providing critical intelligence that shaped the invasion's planning. Women in administrative, communications, and logistical roles ensured that the vast machinery of war kept moving, often without receiving much recognition for their sacrifices and contributions. Among the most overlooked heroes of D-Day were the minority soldiers who fought bravely despite facing discrimination, both at home and within the military. African American units, such as the 320th Barrage Balloon Battalion, played crucial roles. They were responsible for launching and managing barrage balloons, large blimps tethered with steel cables to deter low-flying enemy aircraft from strafing the beaches. Native American soldiers, including members of the Comanche tribe, served as code talkers, using their native languages to send secure communications that the Germans could not decipher. Hispanic and Asian American soldiers also served courageously, often in support and engineering units that were critical to establishing the beachheads and moving supplies inland. These stories remind us that D-Day was not just a victory achieved by generals and famous divisions. It was the result of countless acts of bravery and sacrifice by people whose names often don't appear in history books. Resistance fighters risking everything in the shadows, women who nursed the wounded back from the brink of death, and minority soldiers who fought valiantly for a freedom they had not yet fully experienced themselves. Together, their efforts wove a rich and complex tapestry of courage, one that ensured the success of the invasion and helped set the stage for the liberation of Europe. Their contributions deserve to be remembered as essential threads in the fabric of D-Day's legacy. D-Day stands as one of the most pivotal events in human history, a day when the outcome of World War II and the fate of the modern world hung in the balance. Without the success of June 6, 1944, Nazi Germany might have solidified its grip over Europe, and the long, dark shadow of tyranny could have extended far beyond what we can even imagine. The beaches of Normandy were more than just strategic points on a map. They became the crucible where the ideals of liberty, democracy, and human dignity were defended at immense cost. The soldiers who stormed those beaches, the paratroopers who dropped behind enemy lines, the medics who braved gunfire to save lives, and the countless individuals who supported the invasion from behind the scenes All of them made unimaginable sacrifices. Thousands never returned home. They gave up their futures, their families, and their dreams so that future generations could live free from oppression. Their bravery carved out a path toward victory, peace, and rebuilding a shattered world. D-Day wasn't just about winning a military victory, it was about safeguarding the very principles that define free societies. It was about ordinary people, rising to extraordinary heights when history demanded it most. And today, every time we speak freely, vote openly, or dream boldly, we are living the legacy they fought to preserve. D-Day reminds us that freedom is never free. It must be fought for, cherished, and protected. That day on the beaches of Normandy was not just the beginning of the end of a war. It was the reaffirmation of the enduring human spirit in the face of darkness. If you found this journey through history powerful, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories from the past, and comment below. What part of the D-Day story impacted you the most? We'd love to hear your thoughts and reflections, and if you want to dive even deeper, check out our related videos, like the Fall of Berlin, the final days of WWII, and the story of the Normandy veterans today, to continue exploring the courage, sacrifice, and legacy that shaped our world.